Sciences, here to host our wonderful webinar today. Symbiosis Center for Emotional Wellbeing and Symbiosis Institute of Health Sciences have collaborated together today to commemorate the International Day of Education 2025. This year's UNESCO theme, AI and Education, Preserving Human Agency in a World Automation, invites us to explore how technological advancements like AI are reshaping the educational landscape while keeping human values and autonomy at the core. We are thrilled to have esteemed speaker with us today who bring unique perspectives to this critical discussion. First, joining us is Dr. Asmita Dani. Yes, Dr. Asmita Dani, the Director of Academics at Symbiosis International University, who has been at the forefront of curriculum innovation. She has done her MS in Higher Education and PhD in Educational Leadership and Higher Education at Assumption University in Thailand. She is a higher education leader with more than 20 years of experience in India, Thailand, and USA. Expertise in managing teams, developing a long-term strategy for academic expansion and financial growth, and establishing international collaborations across institutions. Dr. Dani will guide us through the broader implications of AI in education, focusing on its impact on curriculum design, academic integrity, and the evolving role of educators. We also have with us Dr. Girija Mahali, the head of BSc Behavioral Health Sciences program and the director of Symbiosis Center for Emotional Wellbeing. She has close to 15 years of experience in the field and is extremely passionate about mental health and has worked in various subspecialties such as child and adolescent psychiatry, youth mental health, de-addiction medicine, etc. Her specialty area is youth mental health. Apart from that, she has done her MD in psychiatry from St. G.S. Medical College, Kem Hospital. She has acquired her fellowship from Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatry, where she extensively worked with the age group of 12 to 25 years. With extensive expertise in mental health and education, Dr. Girija will dive into the intersection of AI, emotional well-being, and learning environments. Together, our speakers will help us uncover how we can embrace AI's potential while ensuring education remain human-centered, ethical, and inclusive. Additionally, please note that this webinar is being live streamed and we encourage the audience to submit any questions they have via the chat box. And if time allows, we will address the first 5 questions. So I think let's get started. Yes. Okay. So my first question is to Dr. Asmita Dani, ma'am. Ma'am, could you please elaborate on the role of human agency in higher education?
Thank you, Srushti, for the wonderful introduction of mine. And secondly, I would also like to mention here that when the pandemic, that is 2020, happened, I was in United States. I was pursuing my MS in Higher Education Administration and Policy after my PhD there. I experienced a shift in education completely over there. And when I returned to India, I saw a big opportunity where certain concepts can work out really well. And with the NEP implementation, particularly in place like Symbiosis, I thought this is a perfect opportunity for me to exercise what I have learned or implement what I have learned and also exercise my leadership. So this particular role is something that I really I was looking forward to when I came back to India. And when it comes to human agency, this was one of the part of course, education when I studied my degree in education. So there is one human agency theory primarily associated with psychologist Albert Bandura. So anybody who has studied Bandura will vouch for that this has a significant role in higher education. It actually refers to the concept that individuals have the capacity to make choices, influence their own lives, and actively shape their environment through their thoughts, actions, and self-beliefs. Essentially, it is the power to be an agent in one's own life and exert control over one's actions and outcomes. So in higher education, it also means students' ability to make choices and act on them to direct their own learning. So now when we say how it is related and why UNESCO has this particular site, particularly in the times of after pandemic and entry of AI, this human agency plays a key role. Now, there are some key aspects of human agency theory, which I would just quickly run through. One is intentionality. It's the ability to set goals and consciously plan actions to achieve them. Second is forethought. It means anticipating the potential outcome of one's actions and planning accordingly. Third is self-reactiveness. So that is monitoring one's progress towards goals and making adjustments as needed. Fourth is self-reflectiveness, evaluating one's thoughts, actions, and meaning of one's own behavior. And I'm sure Dr. Girija will cover a lot on that because her role and her expertise in that. But however, these key aspects are, a part of human agency theory, which play a significant role in when there is human interaction, but in the higher education sector, which we nowadays call a key component of professionalism and 21st century learning skills. Now, when we, this also means the human agency also means regulating and controlling cognition, motivation, behavior through influence of existing self-beliefs. What is self-belief? It means self-efficacy. That is also keyword for this, particularly in such times where there is so much of change happening. What is self-efficacy? It means it reflects the confidence in the ability to exert control over one's motivation, behavior, and social environment. And this is all about being agent of your own life. So how does this, connect in the era of teaching? In particularly in teaching learning, this entire the webinar will take you through all these various points. And whenever there is something where I can actually share my personal experiences, I'll be happy to do that. If I have to, say that history is replete with examples where everybody had always said that, oh, technology has come, it will take away our jobs, but it never happened. It always created more opportunities. And this is also that time where we are afraid of certain things. We fear that there are certain, negative impact of this, but we have to use and learn to ride this tiger and make use of it judiciously to make the best out of it rather than be afraid of it. I'll give you one example here. In 1988 or in somewhere in 1980s, teachers in United States had actually agitated against the use of calculators in the classroom. And after a few years, they learned how to actually train their students to use calculators wisely rather than replacing them or discarding them. And that's what the theme, I think, is running through even in these times. And we will definitely, the teachers and educators are pivoting themselves into, more adaptability and learning to teach their students, particularly in place like Symbiosis. This is definitely happening. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you, ma'am. Indeed, a powerful response. And I think here some psychology enthusiasts could also peek in, where we had a good discussion about humanistic and existential schools of psychology as well. So thank you for that. Now that we are moving towards an AI-driven technological world, can we have some light shed on how can AI-driven insights into student behavior and performance be used to support emotional well-being without compromising student or human agency? To Dr. Girija.
Yeah, thank you, Srishti. First of all, a warm welcome to all those who have joined us today for this exciting webinar. It's a great discussion, and as we are discussing, I'm also going to be learning a lot of things as the knowledge of AI is still unfolding. And I think over the next decade or so, we will see a lot of new apps, new technology, AI-driven, lots of different tools that will come into actual play and implementation in education and other fields as well. But coming back to your question, Srishti, yes, monitoring student behavior and performance through AI and without really compromising on human agency. How do you really balance that? So first of all, just to give you a little bit of background about the Center for Emotional Wellbeing at Symbiosis. So we started the center in 2018, understanding the mental health needs among this vulnerable population at the university, which belongs to the age group of 18 to 25. And this is a very interesting age group, young adults. And again, from a psychological perspective, this is the age where now the students are becoming autonomous, developing their identity, individuating, having their own opinions, viewpoints, and also are more connected with their peers. So this is a very also they're making choices with regards to their career, and now becoming more independent, right? So a very important transition point in students' life. Now, when we talk about emotional well-being and monitoring, anything that to do with monitoring, it means that we are taking some control of the students. So anything that you do with respect to students, if we are able to respect their autonomy, if they're able to respect their privacy, and we are able to even respect the agency in all the decisions that we're taking for them, I think it will be successful. Even when we started our Center for Emotional Wellbeing, that was a very specific point that we outlined in our policy when we were setting up our services, that the service has to be youth friendly in the sense that students' viewpoints need to be taken into consideration when we are implementing our services through SKU. So all the activities, in fact, all promotive preventive activities that we do through our Center for Emotional Wellbeing, we take students' perspective into consideration. And that's, I think, been the core USP of our center, which makes the events and activities uh, well taken, well received by students and well participated by students as well. So we run an active peer support program at Symbiosis where students become the ambassadors for their own mental health. Now, how does this link with AI? Now, when you speak about monitoring student performance and student behavior, as I said, that means we are collecting some data using some AI tools, right? When we are collecting data, we have to be absolutely transparent with our data collection. So if we are using any AI tools to monitor student behavior and performance, then we need to ensure that we are communicating this with students. What sort of data are we collecting? What are we going to utilize it for? How are we going to be utilizing that data? If that transparent communication is done, then these informed students can consent for this data collection, and with a full understanding of its implications, fostering that trust and empowering them to take that decision to consent for that data collection. Right? Only then can we have them on board, because ultimately we are doing it for what? For enhancing the student performance, for enhancing their emotional well-being, and for eventually getting successful student outcomes, right? So secondly, how are we empowering these students with the data? So instead of just utilizing the data by faculty or by, say, counselors or team members, if that data can, if the students can have access to their own data. For example, now we are doing the emotional well-being screening for our students. We are not using any AI tool, mind you, but we are using technology for, we have created a screening tool which is circulated online, and the students then fill in that screening tool to understand the students' mental health, right, at this point in time. Now, if we these results are visible to the students. So when they fill out the form, they do get a feedback as to where do they stand with respect to their mental health. So if students have access to their own data, then it will help students to work on themselves. So that agency, what we are talking about, the ability to then self-reflect on themselves, to understand where they are on that spectrum of mental health, will actually empower them to take decisions to work on themselves and move in that positive direction. As against if that data was just being used, say, by our counselors from Team SKU and not being shared with the students will feel that loss of control and will not actively participate in all the initiatives. Or even if we were to encourage them to come for counseling, I don't think they would really be forthcoming with that aspect. So that's very, very important. Thirdly, if we can use feedback which is actionable and which is which is very personalized. So if we can have the AI tools, the data that we are deriving, if it can give personalized feedback, which will allow the students again to choose what sort of interventions would they be likely to take, then that gives them a choice and again an autonomy and again an agency to work on themselves and move forward. For example, I'll give an example. Sometimes it so happens that a particular school of thought is something that we believe in. For example, now, yoga is a buzzword everywhere, or mindfulness is a buzzword. And we tend to implement it and impose it and say that, okay, this is mandatory now, every student should be doing it because that's good for their wellness. But not, again, understanding that every individual is different. And if we go back to what Dani madam said, that if a student is understood as an individual, having its own mind, understanding that they have their own belief systems and thought processes, then imposing certain things will not be of benefit. So even though you're monitoring the student performance and the behavior using AI tools, it's not really going to give the expected outcome of actually improving the student performance unless the agency of the student is maintained. So what I'm driving here is that while AI tools can be a great way in which you can monitor the student performance and behavior, and it can really be scalable, it can do a great job in understanding or identifying the early signs of distress or anxiety or depression just based on the performance, attendance, behavior of the student. Unless the student has access to this and consents to this, we will not be able to utilize it in the right manner. Respecting privacy, confidentiality, and I think that's going to be a common point across this discussion, because I think that's true even when we are not using AI. It's core component of counseling that privacy and confidentiality is core to our services, right? To our counseling services. And that's very, very important when it comes to student services. So if we ensure that this data is going to be private, that it's anonymized, and this information is again shared with students, I'm sure that students would be party to their performance and academic and their behavior being monitored using AI tools. I hope I've answered and not diverted too much from the question.
No, ma'am, I must say a very well articulated response, and I strongly believe you being the head of SKU, we were actually expecting a much powerful response from your side. And indeed, this is a great platform for people to learn what SKU is, and it's one of its kind center. So I'm glad for your response. And now moving to Dr. Asmita, as we are focusing on the students of higher education institutions, ma'am, how can institutions use AI ethically to track performance while preparing students for an AI-driven future with essential human skills such as empathy, communication, and ethical reasoning?
So Dr. Girija has covered a lot about, I mean, she has covered mostly about what is the data privacy. So it's not just related to when you are collecting data for their, overall well-being or through the counseling, etc. And because it's a taboo that somebody visiting a counseling center could be a taboo, that's why we have to keep it private. Actually, ethical use of AI is directly related to students' rights. And when you say ethics, ethics always play in a larger context. They are not particularly, specific to a particular profession or a particular, region. However, their manifestation is different at different places. So, for example, if you go to the Western part of the world, students are quite well aware about their rights, and they can actually, their activism is very high about it compared to what happens in India. But I can see that happening slowly even in India. And that's why progressive universities like us, we are taking proactive measures to, about the data privacy and how we can protect students' rights. So when we talk about ethical use of AI, it is, as I said, it is directly related to the students' rights. So what are their rights? Is their transparency, the transparency to know the processes through which they are learning, the equal treatment, equity, confidentiality, academic freedom, discrimination protection, grievance reporting. So these are some of the, very key student rights that even in India we see, now we see that students have started becoming vocal about. They ask questions. Why was my data shared without my permission? So, at a university level, when we have to deal with such issues, particularly while we are designing our curriculum, while we are designing, we take extra care that students are aware of their own rights. We also teach them rights also come with duties and responsibilities. So this is a heady mix of things. When we say how to use AI ethically, the human agency comes into the picture. So agency here for teachers as well as for students both. It's not just the students, but here the educator's role is also very crucial. Now, this entire discussion is related to emerging privacy trends, and it reflects the importance of integrating privacy and security, data protection methods, and best practices to avoid detrimental data breaches. So, for example, sometimes there could be a hacking. There could be, even if we have taken the utmost care, and if somebody hacks your, say, system, and your data is, exposed. So what are the proactive measures that we can take in such cases? What are the various steps, which is also a part of crisis management nowadays? So when it comes to educating teachers as well as students, this is also being covered as a part of crisis management. It's not just the earthquake or any kind of deluge, but it also is related to the the cyber security, what we call, and how to manage the crisis in such cases. So the progressive universities in the western part of the world, or even in the eastern part of the world, are quite aware about this, and particularly, how to track students ethically. When you say that students should be aware of their rights, what do you mean? Taking their consent to share their data? Are they aware? Are they reading it appropriately? Do they have a choice to say no? And if they say no, are you being transparent in telling them the implications of this? So that is actually the agency, and that is what we try to develop in our students so that they can make those choices correctly. So this is the role of educators in this completely, or whenever there is this ethical dilemma. And I always say that everything is related to ethical dilemma, whether this is right or wrong. So even if you are making some choice, you are always on the threshold. Sometimes you make choices because you know that you are choosing the right thing. But what happens when you have to choose two wrongs? You have to choose between two wrong things, or you have to choose between two right things. So that is where people like me say that, okay, I know that AI could be useful for education. There could be people, those who feel that this should be discarded completely and this is taking away our autonomy. But then, as I said, when you have to choose between good and bad, it's easy. But when you have to choose between two good things, it becomes very challenging. Now, you also asked me about human skills like empathy, communication. Like I spoke about, when it comes to, students' rights to know things, and also their choices to say yes or no when it comes to data privacy and whether they want to share their data or not. As I said, we are taking proactive measures. But then, in this era, how do you then develop these human skills like empathy, communication, and ethical reasoning? I think there is single answer to this is fostering their emotional intelligence. And I think Dr. Girija will agree with me that a lot of people forget about the college going kids. Even the adults actually need a lot of training. And I don't know whether she knows better whether this can be, somebody can be trained, but definitely can be made aware that there is something like emotional intelligence, which is a vital skill set for fostering human agency and judicious use of anything, including your generative AI. So it's, emotional intelligence is moreover, it aids in your ethical decision making. So it's not just being aware of your own emotions and somebody else's emotions, which is again we call as empathy, and communicating wrong things also in the right way is also, something as part of emotional intelligence, which a lot of even adults lack. So it's at the, right age, when at the undergrad level students come to us, that is the right age to teach them all these things if they have not learned it in the school. And particularly in the era when there are nuclear families where the sharing is not happening much, compassion and, these things are lacking in children, particularly children, those who are single, they do not know how to share their stuff. So for such things, that's why when they come to the universities, the role of educators is to foster their emotional intelligence. You know, uh, Emotional intelligence is not just being emotionally intelligent, because it's a larger part of our intelligence, but it also facilitates harmonious collaborations between humans and AI. So, as I said, there could be extreme reactions to this, and there could be a balanced reaction to this. So, is there a possibility of harmonious collaboration? Yes, there is a possibility, and this is where emotional intelligence come into the picture. This also empowers individuals to harness the full potential of AI while mitigating its limitations. So when I say emotional intelligence, it is useful and it empowers individuals, and they know how to mitigate its limitations and the rest. That's my answer to your question. Thank you, Srishti.
I think indeed great insights, ma'am. And we even got more insights about student rights, hacking, and ethically tracking students. And as you opened the portal to learn more about emotional intelligence, I think me and even Dr. Girija couldn't agree more on the point. So yeah, this brings us to our next question for Dr. Girija. Ma'am, how do you see AI enhancing or diminishing the value of emotional support services provided to students in educational institutions?
Thank you, Srishti. So, emotional support services in educational institutes. I think it's becoming a very key aspect now across India and across the globe, where abroad already that. Can I request? I think somebody in the
Yes,
audience, if they can mute themselves. IT, if you can mute the audience, please. There's some background noise.
yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so mental health services or emotional support services in educational institutes now is a necessity. It's no longer a choice, as we are seeing that mental health concerns amongst the young individuals is on the rise. Can I request the audience to please mute themselves? There's a lot of disturbance.
Can IT please look into it, please?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so uh, educational institutes need to have emotional support services. Now, how can AI either will it enhance, will it create a challenge? I think like every coin has two sides. There would be pros and cons of having AI support to the emotional support services. Definitely, AI can help in the AI driven tools can help in monitoring student attendance, performance, behavior, which can help in identifying early signs of stress, anxiety, depression, as I mentioned previously. AI can also help in administrative tasks for the emotional support services, like booking appointments, doing the initial assessments, all the preliminary triage work, just identifying or being able to distinguish between mild to moderate to severe. AI tools can definitely be utilized over there. AI tools can also increase the scalability, because as we know that the mental health professionals available to the community at large are far few. We have really a dearth of psychiatrists, a dearth of psychologists, and educational institutes struggle to appoint more because of lack of funding resources, right? So their AI can be a real great support where we can utilize resources effectively to scale the extent of services offered to the students. Moreover, use of chatbots, virtual counselors are now very much, many of the private sector is looking into creating such apps which are beneficial for mild mental health issues or supportive services. Supportive psychotherapy can be provided through these chatbots or virtual counselors. There are a lot of gamified mental health apps that are now available, which actually can also be utilized not just for anxiety, depression, but they can also be used for improving cognition. So these gamified mental health apps can actually help to improve students' concentration, attention span, memory, and I'm personally in talks with one of the technological professionals for getting that to Symbiosis, for getting these gamified mental health apps. We are planning to set up a mind studio where we are planning to have these gamified mental health apps to improve the cognition of our students. Because the post-pandemic, we did see that the cognitive capacity of students, because of being on their devices for a very long duration of time, and of course, there's not just one reason, but complex interplay between lack of social interaction and excessive digital exposure, that has impacted their cognitive capacity, which we observe in classrooms, that their ability to sit through the classes has gone down, their ability to pay attention to the teacher, they get distracted very easily, or their ability to read or write has also gone down significantly. So definitely these gamified mental health apps can be very much used. and stigma reduction, right? So many of the times, because there is so much stigma attached to mental health, reaching out to a professional on campus might be very might some students may not be very open to seeing a counselor, and they might be more comfortable interacting online with a virtual app where they know that there is no human interface there, and there might be a percentage of clients who might be more comfortable with that sort of a virtual interaction. That's the positive aspects of supporting the emotional support services on campus. But there is also a flip side, because as Asmita Dani ma'am rightly said, that emotional intelligence, empathy is very much a part of uh, counseling. And unless you are empathetic, the non-verbal cues are very, very important in a counseling session. It's not just about what you speak, it's about how you speak. It's the tone, the language, the non-verbal expressions that are very crucial in counseling process. And just having somebody to comfort you, to understand those cues and modify your counseling is what a true professional can do in a session. And that loss of human connection can be the downside of a AI tool, because AI tool is what it is, artificial intelligence, right? It's a system driven, so whatever data it is getting, it's just going to process it, and the response is going to be based. It will not be able to modify or tweak based on the non-verbal communication that the person is exhibiting. I mean, probably technology will work on that as well, and we don't know how it's going to, what 20 years down the line, what we're going to see. But at the moment, at least, what we are observing is that it can assist, but it cannot replace human interaction. Secondly, there could be bias in the AI models, right? Because again, AI is not, it's not creative. It is what data you're feeding into it, it is going to derive algorithms based on that. So if the data that you're feeding is not coming from a diverse sector, or it's not representing the minority section of society or the underprivileged, then there is going to be a bias, right? So for example, there are students belonging to the LGBTQI plus community. Their needs might be different. And if the AI algorithm has not received the data from that particular community, then it's not going to be able to customize it to that particular community. So for example, in therapists also, we have some trauma-informed therapists. We have LGBTQI plus queer community trained therapists. So based on their individual needs, the therapist understands that there are certain strategies that the therapist needs to utilize for certain populations. This, unless the AI is trained in, will not be able to provide. Again, data privacy has already been mentioned, so I'll not repeat that. And sometimes, see, mental health is complex. It is not a single formula, right? Like, it's not 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. It is an interplay between biology, it is an interplay between psychology and the social, environmental, cultural factors that all interact to for to determine an individual's mental health. So sometimes AI can therefore oversimplify and may not be accurate, or may not. So therefore, the validity of the AI tools definitely needs to be verified before before actually implementing any of these AI tools in a academic institute, because certainly the principle in medical science is do no harm. So if you can't do good, at least don't do harm, and that risk has to be definitely weighed before any of these tools can be directly implemented. So what I would suggest is have just like we have SKU, educational institutes need to have human counselors on campus, but it can be complemented and supplemented with the use of AI tools. It cannot replace human counselors. There are a lot of now, I also receive a lot of emails from industry professionals saying that we have come up with this app, your campus can have it. And I always am very forthcoming. I talk to them also, but I say that we cannot replace it, because risk, identifying some individuals might be at high risk of suicide. And if again, that risk is not identified in time, there is a risk of losing a life, and we cannot afford that, right? So also another aspect I want to talk about is, as I mentioned, that AI in itself is not creative. It is completely dependent on the data that it is being fed. And so if we are just using AI in education, if we are using AI in for emotional support services, there is a chance of over reliance on it, and therefore the student losing his inherent ability to problem solve. So if, see, for example, today, even my younger daughter, for example, if she's given homework, she's going to chat GPT. And there's no way we are going to be able to stop this generation from doing that. There's no way. But the fear is that, are these children then going to lose their creative capacity, their ability to actually reason out before they come up with an answer, their ability to do logical problem solving, their decision making, is that going to, this only time will tell, I think. uh, but the answer that I think for myself is that if we have a balance in, like, while we read chat gpt, we have to use our own mind, and the prompts we give to ChatGPT also would determine the answers that we are getting, right? So there we have to use our mind and put in the prompts. So I guess it has to be a good balance between the two, and definitely it can be used to complement the emotional support services on academic institutes. To sum
Okay.
it up.
I would say a much modernized, balanced, and thoughtful response to share with us, and also shed light on virtual counselors, or whether be it gamified mental health apps. Moreover, stigma reduction. But I feel that balance of both is something all of us is looking for, which will not cross or rule out some other important aspect of it. Thank you
Absolutely.
so much, ma'am. Now, my question to Dr. Asmita is, how can AI help in adapting educational content to meet the needs of students with different learning styles and abilities, ma'am?
Okay. See, this is my favorite question. I always, because being an educator, we always, my one of my professors of education would ask me a question. If there are, say, similar demography students sitting in your class, that is homogeneous class, and then there is a heterogeneous class, which class would you prefer? And which is easier to, I mean, not prefer, but what is easier to teach? And I would always say, yeah, it's a homogeneous class, which is easier to teach because you don't need to tweak any of your, teaching styles or anything. They will all understand in a certain way. However, it is a challenge to teach a heterogeneous class. And I will tell you something very proudly that when I was out of India, I had a mix of 7 nationalities in my class to whom I would teach. Some of them had language deficits because they couldn't understand English if you speak in English very fast. Some of them had some other cultural biases and baggages that they carried with them. And that became a biggest challenge for an Indian teacher to teach on a foreign land. So when it comes to, teaching different styles and their abilities and who is sitting in front of you when you cannot see their, reactions, or maybe their reactions you cannot read because you are not culturally trained for that. I mean, you do not have a cultural intelligence. Cues and other, intelligence is a combination of multiple of these things. So one of the best things that I have learned going abroad is to be culturally very, very agile, to be very adaptive, and to know that your students may understand things at different times and in different ways. Now, if you look at the, language teachers, they always say that, oh, my students learn in 4 ways to act, take any action on it. However, when it comes to active skills, they are your speaking and writing, where you have to actually produce something on the basis of what you have learned. So this LSRW concept of teaching learning, in particularly in language, I thought I'll give you an example here, because this is how teachers navigate their overall teaching in universities where, they have freedom. And this is where even the teachers' rights come into the picture, and use of, chat GPT or AI. So AI can be very useful in identifying unique learning. The students are visual materials, enhancing student engagement and even their retention. Retention is not a problem in Indian context because our students are very focused, and dropping out of the school is not a big problem for us yet. However, a lot of other part of it where you will see students not dropping out, but they do not complete their degrees because of the because they are not all traditional students like we have in India. Those who are between the age group of 17 to 20, have their masters. So this, I mean, that's the optimal use of, I mean, AI, generative AI, to address the needs of even non-traditional as well as non-traditional students. Here I say non-traditional, those who have to stop their learning because of the extraordinary circumstances in their lives. It could be loss of parent, it could be loss of a job of a parent, or maybe health issues or anything. And then they always, it becomes very difficult for people like them to enter the education system again. So for them, this kind of, generative AI tools are a boon, they are a blessing. Even for traditional students, they are, because now.
I think
Hello,
your internet is,
am I audible?
yeah, your voice is breaking, ma'am. It's your
Yes.
internet is lagging, I think.
Okay, is it okay now?
Yeah.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, you're audible.
Better?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so, coming back to what do you mean by a conversational AI, which has a potential to revolutionize education by providing personalized learning. Now, here comes the word personalized learning. What do you mean by, like I just gave you an example that some people have visual, some people have auditory. See, for example, if you ask me to listen to something for longer hours, my mind starts wandering. If you ask me to read, still my mind starts wandering. The only way to bring my mind back to what I am doing, the activity, is to write. So writing becomes my actually a help. And this personalized learning is possible through conversational AI in such a way that it maximizes the learning of the students. So for educators, it's a boon, and this definitely can meet the needs of students with different learning styles and abilities, which was never addressed in the past, except for which was totally dependent on the individual teachers. Like if we have to remember our school, we always remember our school's best teachers, because not because they were the best teachers, but because they understood our needs and explained things in those ways.
Yeah.
And if that role can be replaced by, conversational AI, which is, I mean, a supporting role of the main teacher who may not be able to address these issues, can solve a lot of problems in the traditional learning. However, as I said, for non-traditional students, this is definitely a big help, because they can only learn in certain, they may not be a part of credit system where you have to complete the number of hours, but they have to achieve certain competencies and then get those certificates in whatever speed, with whatever, their convenience that they want to learn. And that's why I think this is a boon for such things. So we only look at, when it comes to education, we only look at the age group of 17 to 24. And then we say that, oh, somebody who is not able to do that can go for online learning. But I am not very sure whether distance and online learning is still, respected as much as the traditional learning is. So what can replace traditional learning with the similar impact for non-traditional students could be a combination of this kind of conversation. So it is not just left to those students, but also they are assigned a mentor who help them in understanding what they have learned throughout this a particular module, and how they fared in the assessments and why, which help them actually reflect on their own thinking, which is for me, that is a higher order thinking that they develop. And also this also develops their agency. So this is where I think, for me, I always promote that, AI will help adapt its content to suit the learning needs of various students. That's my take on this.
That's indeed a great insight, ma'am. And your personalized examples make it more interesting. And I couldn't agree more on the point that the mentors even need to update themselves and learn, because they are our very first teachers where students learn from. So it's better to get them updated as well. Thank you so much for your insight, ma'am. Now shifting our focus to another critical aspect of modern education, Dr. Girja, I'd like to ask you about the potential mental health risks associated with increased automation in learning environments, and how can these be mitigated?
Right. Yeah, so while Asmita ma'am has rightly mentioned the pros of automated learning environments, uh, there are some mental health risks associated with it. As we have seen during the pandemic times, that while online education had its positives, whereby it made it possible for students to learn from their home environments, it definitely led to decreased social interaction, social skill set, and thereby leading to isolation and loneliness. And today, if you see in the United States of America, loneliness is the prime reason for, it's the number one killer, in fact, second to heart disease. So, anything in excess, I feel, is dangerous. That's again coming back to the whole theory of balance. It's anything that will take away completely the human elements out, will definitely not be good for humanity in general. If you're going to be constantly facing a device or interacting with a virtual, the ability to then read emotions of other people, to navigate those conversations, to resolve conflicts, or to deal with negative emotions also will become a challenge for students. And that's my fear. Okay. So reduce face-to-face interaction between, and see, a learning environment has you don't just learn from what the teacher is teaching. You're actually learning from peers. You're learning from the interactions, the discussions that they bring in. It is the cues that you receive from a classroom actually which enhances your motivation to study. It's not just about how the teacher is teaching, it is the whole overall environment that you're in actually that influences your learning process. So emotions are very key to learning. And therefore, a, uh, if a student is experiencing negative emotions, uh, uh, just facing virtual environments all the time, then it is not only going to impact their learning, it's going to impact their motivation and their engagement with learning. And that's going to be very detrimental in the long run. Also, there's something called as techno stress. Constantly having to adapt to the technological advances actually overwhelms students. And not just students, it can overwhelm teachers also. Constantly new technology coming in, you requiring to adapt to it. While there are advantages to it, not everyone is able to navigate these technologies very easily. And that can actually contribute to a lot of stress and feelings of overwhelm in some students. Like, again, as coming down to the point that every individual is different, their learning needs are different, they can be different types of learners. And AI, while it can, it may also not. So understanding that what AI tools you're using for learning, what it can provide, and how it can foster and actually encourage student learning will have to be observed and thereby implemented. Also, as again previously mentioned, over-reliance on anything can decrease their inherent ability to for the student to go out and find their own answers. If you're getting answers very easily, then their inherent ability to go and search for answers in textbooks or to use their critical thinking ability of your executive function, your problem solving, your planning, your organizational skills, all that I fear that in the long run, if if this is going to be the way we are going to operate in educational institutes, then there is a likelihood that this is a downfall that we might see in terms of the executive functioning of the brains of human beings in general. and of course, unequal access. I mean, not everyone is privileged to have access to these AI tools. So there can be, again, a big divide. Already we are seeing that there is a big divide in the way education is accessed in India itself, because we are majority rural population. So uh, if it's going to be accessible only to privileged institutes, then what happens to those who are coming from rural backgrounds? And they not having that access to, how is it going to impact their education and their progress and their mental health in turn? Because it's all interlinked. It's not like we cannot compartmentalize any one thing, and we have to understand it in a total scenario, and therefore having these multiple stakeholders. So I'm glad today that, Srishti, for this webinar you invited the director of academics and alongside a mental health professional. So we are talking and discussing about and understanding each other's aspects and how they interplay to contribute to education and technology in education overall. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. First of all, I personally believe, being a lecturer myself, that over reliance actually impacts critical thinking ability of students a lot. And on the other hand, even accessibility in our nation is a big concern that needs to be addressed. So, yeah, completely agree to that point, ma'am. So, while addressing the mental health risks of automation is critical, it's also important to explore how we can ensure that AI remains a tool that enhances rather than diminishes human connections in education, right? So, Dr. Asmita, building on this idea, in what ways can AI driven tools be designed to support rather than replace the human elements of teaching and mentorship?
Thank you for this question.
Yes.
I would also like to, say what Dr. Girija said, that it's an interplay. You cannot look at things, in isolation. They don't work, I mean, independently. They are all interdependent. So when it comes to students, it is also, for the educators, it's necessary to know the positives and negatives of anything that enters the education. Now, there are two thought processes here. First, I would appreciate Dr. Girija bringing up the topic of accessibility, because India has a huge digital divide. While we are a nation where everybody has a mobile, they may not have water to drink, but at the same time, they have access to mobiles thanks to the current technological trends, which is reaching every nook and corner, but they may not have strong internet facility. So that may hamper their learning, and that will create another divide. So rather than only the poor and rich and the other, in the most divided world, we'll have another divide where the people with access to internet and people without access to internet or with poor internet, and their learning might get impacted. So this digital divide, on which a lot research is happening, and then how to even support these kind of students, those who want to learn but do not have uh, the facilities. Similar is with the mental health support. They may not have mental health support, and then how to reach out to those students. So those are some very high level, national level, issues. But when it comes to the classroom, and if you look at the larger university system, not just one part of system, where I'm sitting here in symbiosis, so I cannot look at only the symbiosis students and their needs. As an educator, I also look at what type of thought process is emerging at various levels. So first is, there are some people, those who work in the ed tech, they are quite positive about this, that this is good. So even during pandemic, they said, education is going, traditional education will be replaced with online education, and everything is going to change, and this is not just the new normal, this is the next normal. So they all wanted to change the narrative of education, which never happened. The brick and mortar system remains, as Dr. Girija rightly said, that the human interactions are equally important. However, as I said, technology can be very, very supportive in filling up the gaps that education cannot fill out. So for you and me, it may not be possible to do everything. I'm a very dedicated teacher, but I cannot change the world. I want to change the world, but I cannot do that. So how do I innovate in such a way with the help of technology that at least I can influence and impact my surroundings? And that is where the role of educators come into the picture. So as I said, there are two thoughts process. One was edtech companies were saying it will replace, and then there were traditional teachers who said, oh, this is just a fad and it will go away. Don't worry, this is just a fad. However, there were some people, those who were consistently, persistently working towards it with a tinkering approach. Because see, higher education and changes in higher education is a maddening process. When you go two steps ahead, sometimes you have to come one step back. So it's never it's a never ending process, and you have to keep inventing yourself in education. And that's what in the times of AI, when you say what type of tools be designed, it again depends on what are the current needs, and it will keep on emerging. It will keep on emerging the new challenges and the newer ways of addressing, engaging with the students with the help of AI, so that we can bring the scalability to education. Like she rightly said, that this is good for scalability, that, at scale instruction is one of the, again, word that, everyone talks about in the Western part of the world, because they know that there are certain, for example, if I want to have an access to the professor of Harvard, and I may not be able to physically go there, and then you may not be able to even interact with him or her, but at least you can listen. Like we used to read their books earlier, we can listen, and then we can post it. Like just now Srushti did. She said, if you have questions, please post your questions. So we will select the first 5 questions and respond to them. So I may not be able to talk directly to them, but technology is helping me answer those questions, because we can connect directly in a synchronous mode without being physically present in front of them. So it's not, the goal is not to eliminate traditional teaching methods, but to enrich them, ensuring students thrive academically, develop the skills necessary to succeed once they graduate. So the tools that we should have, I could give a few examples where we talk about adaptive learning or assistive technology or data and learning analytics that help students' needs. And then you can find out the trends and the gaps, etc., which can be very, very helpful, which otherwise used to take a lot of time to analyze and, bring innovations in the teaching learning processes. Secondly, there is a lot of, like Dr. Girija has covered this, but I would also like to say that educators in the class or outside the class, or the policy, people, those who are in the policy making, can use technology in such a way that they, reduce some of their administrative tasks and give it to the generative AI. For example, automated grading, assessment tools, or maybe curriculum planning or proctoring. These are some of the things which could be, of course, proctoring has some negative impacts. I know that, you're sitting at your home, though you have safe browser, you are doing everything. We are exposing our students to a wide range of, to the black and dark internet, etc., when we do the proctoring. I mean, online proctoring has its, and USA and other part of the world has already started talking about it, and they do not want to expose their students to some of these parts, and that's why they are not for it. But then, if you use it, again, I will use the word judiciously and ethically, there is a possibility that this kind of tools will be very helpful in reducing some of our administrative tasks, so that teachers can focus on innovating their teaching learning style, and also research the newer ways of teaching, and research on the content of the teaching, rather than, see, ultimately what goes into the AI is all generated by teachers. It is not something that has come from nowhere. It's a part of some publicly available knowledge, that, so who has created, who has generated this knowledge? The teachers, the researchers, from where this field has gone. And that's why I feel these AI driven tools, the example I gave about adaptive learning, which helps in personalize somebody's learning. So you can chart your own path, you can have your own goals, and you can, see, for example, even if I'm a part of larger group of MBA, but I don't want to go into a particular, employment sector, I want to be an entrepreneur here. So these tools can be helpful in, these adaptive learning tools can be helpful in designing your own path. So these are some of the, good example. But I also agree with Dr. Girija that this may reduce human interaction. But as I said, this is not to replace it, but to enhance it. And that's what I also strongly believe in. And I suggest that even the educators look at it this way, rather than, and even there, I also would like the traditional people, those who feel that these AI tools will replace teachers. It will never happen, because ultimately we are the ones who are creating knowledge, generating knowledge, and, creating a larger context, rather than the AI tools. But they are definitely helpful and can enhance students' learning as well as their learning experience on campus and off campus both. That's my take on this.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And I feel a lot of audience here and everyone who is in the webinar right now could receive a lot of inputs on the debate of traditional teaching versus modern AI-based teaching approach that we are in a constant debate of. And I couldn't agree more on the point that adaptive and assistive learning could be used in enhancement and not to maybe replace something that we are already familiar with. And also, I would like to compliment what a presence of mind, ma'am, with the chat box example. And it's really fascinating to have you with us today. To inform everyone, with that, we have reached the end of our discussion today. And let's now take a look at the questions shared by the audience in the chat box, if there are any. Can we please have questions if there are any in the chat box?
One last point I would like to add now, because I'm in the role of a teacher as well at BSc in Behavioral Health Science, and what initial days, when AI had just come into the picture and ChatGPT was being utilized, there was a hue and cry from the faculty side that, for assignments, students are using ChatGPT. Then we would go to Turnitin and see plagiarism and all of that. So we soon realized that, see, students are going to do it. There is no way around it. And then faculty also became smart. And so it is a process of evolving, right? So understand one thing, human brain will always be smarter.
Evolve. Yes.
Always
Yes.
be. And it's human brain that has devised AI. So it is. So once we see a challenge, our brain, our executive brain will see the problem, analyze it, come with problem solving. That will come through what? Human collaboration. So
Human
faculty said,
agency.
yes, human agency. And
Yes.
human beings will connect, they will discuss, they will deliberate, and they will come up with a solution for that. So the solution was that now give them assignments in class where, where they're actually made to do group assignments or some skill-based experiential learning type of assignments where they don't get to, or utilize ChatGPT in a way which actually enhances their learning rather than seeing it as a barrier to learning. Let them use it and tell them, I'll also design my assignment using ChatGPT. Let's see how many different answers can come using ChatGPT as well. So rather than getting scared or that becoming a negative factor for your teaching learning, how can you incorporate it, welcome this new person in your life? Don't look at it as a stranger, welcome it, and but establish boundaries around it, right? Like as you would do with human beings. You would welcome the new individual, you'll take all the strengths from this individual, but you will establish boundaries. You will not be too much intrusive, and you will not completely rely on this new individual. So same, think of AI as your partner where you establish clear boundaries, where there is a clear privacy contract, where there is where we understand what strengths we can utilize from it and understand the potential hazards of it. Then we will be in harmony with AI, and 110% it will lead us to progress only, and it will not allow us to go backwards.
Indeed, ma'am. And what a wonderful, inspiring, and enriching collaboration of, I think, academics and behavioral health sciences on this wonderful topic. And I'd also like to appreciate the audience for posting such wonderful comments for the webinar. And I think we have got one question from, yes, this is from Mr. Ganesh Pawar. So how AI and ChatGPT affect on education institute and profession? What kind of preparedness is required from individual side to take this change in a positive sense? Yes, ma'am. Anyone of you can answer.
I think I've already spoken to it,
Yeah,
but maybe
we've
if
already spoken about this, but then I think from the mental health side, Girija ma'am will always say that lesser the interaction with your, the screen time, better you're off. And I will always say that if you're using it, use it judiciously, but don't discard it, because it has already entered our lives. Even if it goes, it will leave its residues to us, which we will have to deal with. Rather than that, learn to ride this tiger.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. And with this, we come to the end of our webinar. So I would like to thank Dr. Asmita Dani and Dr. Girija Mahale for their enlightening contributions in today's discussion. And as we have explored, AI holds incredible promise for transforming education and supporting emotional well-being. But it's clear that preserving human agencies and values must remain a priority for all of us, right? So to our audience, we hope this webinar inspires you to think critically about the future of education and how we can embrace AI responsibly. So thank you for joining us, and we wish you a meaningful International Day of Education.
Thank you for
Thank you,
inviting me
Srishti.
and have a great day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
Ma'am, can we just stay back for one picture? I will just quickly,
Oh, yes.
4 of us, yes.
Also, if the audience can
If the
actually
audience
switch
can
on their
join,
video.
yes. If the audience can switch on their cameras for a while, it'll be a great, yes. Swarali, can you also click one with the mobile phone? I'll click one on the laptop. Okay. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for
Thank
joining
you.
in. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day. Yes.
You too.
Ma'am, stop YouTube live.
Yes.